There's a specific kind of person who walks into a sparse, almost empty room, bare walls, a few plants, a single couch, and feels something inside them loosen. Like they can finally exhale. And then there's everyone else standing in that same room feeling slightly uneasy. Maybe even a little sad. What separates those two reactions usually isn't taste. It's psychology. Minimalism often gets treated like a design trend, a style choice, a visual preference. But for a lot of people, it runs much deeper than that. Psychologists have spent decades studying what human beings need in order to feel psychologically well, not just successful or productive, but steady and okay at a deeper level. One of the most important needs they identified is autonomy. People need to feel that their life actually belongs to them, that their choices, routines, and surroundings reflect who they are rather than who they feel pressure to become. When that feeling disappears, something inside people tightens. And individuals with a stronger need for autonomy tend to make more deliberate choices about how they live, including how they shape the spaces around them. For these people, an uncluttered room isn't a lack of personality. It's evidence that the environment feels chosen, managed, owned. Most people don't consciously experience that distinction, but people wired this way feel it immediately. There's another trait that often shows up here too: sensitivity. And not the shallow version people usually imagine. Not fragility. Not being dramatic. Actual nervous system sensitivity. For some people, clutter doesn't just look messy. It feels mentally loud. Their brain doesn't filter visual and sensory information as easily, so more of it gets through. A pile of clothes in the corner. A stack of unopened mail. A crowded shelf. A cluttered countertop. None of those things are neutral. They keep pulling a little bit of attention, even in the background. Psychologist Elaine Aron's work on highly sensitive people helped explain this. Her research suggests that around 15 to 20% of people process sensory and emotional input more deeply than average. That means overstimulation affects them faster and more intensely, which makes quiet, simple environments feel less like a luxury and more like relief. For those people, minimalism isn't really about aesthetics. It's regulation. Think of your attention like battery life. Every object in your environment that catches your eye uses a little bit of that battery. You may not consciously think about it, but your brain still registers it, still keeps track of it. Research on attention has shown that when multiple unrelated things compete for awareness, the brain has to divide its processing power. It can't fully focus on any one thing. It splits. That split may seem small in the moment, but over the course of a day, it adds up. And for people who already think deeply, reflect constantly, or feel easily overstimulated, that extra drain matters. It can be the difference between clarity and fog, between calm and irritability. That's part of why some people become almost protective of clear surfaces and open space. Not because they want their room to look impressive, but because they're trying to keep enough mental bandwidth available for their thoughts to fully form. The nearly empty room that feels peaceful to one person may feel lonely or unfinished to someone else, because not everyone experiences space the same way. Some people feel comfort through abundance. Books everywhere. Photos on every wall. Objects layered with memory and meaning. Others feel calmer when nothing is competing for them. Neither is more correct, but the difference matters. Because a lot of minimalists spend years being told their preference is cold, sterile, or strange, when really it may just be their nervous system asking for less input. There's another layer underneath this too. Consumer psychologist Russell Belk proposed the idea of the extended self. The basic idea is that people often build identity through the things they own. Possessions become symbols of who they are. Their taste, their history, their values. For many people that feels natural. But some people come to a different conclusion. Sometimes early. Sometimes only after disappointment, burnout, or loss. They start to feel that a self built on possessions is unstable, too dependent on things outside them. And that realization can quietly pull them towards simplicity. Not because they hate objects, but because they don't want their identity to rely on them. For these people, owning less can feel like stripping away noise. It can create a sense of self that feels more stable, more internal, less dependent on display. But this is where minimalism gets complicated. Because the same traits that make someone genuinely suited for simplicity can also make minimalism tempting during periods of emotional stress. Imagine someone a few days after a breakup. Not the visibly dramatic version. The eerily functional version. The one cleaning out drawers, throwing things away, rearranging furniture, clearing surfaces. From the outside, it can look like they're resetting. And sometimes they are. But psychologically, it can also be a form of compensatory control. When life feels emotionally chaotic, people often reach for something concrete they can control. A room, a closet, a shelf. Each decision creates a tiny feeling of order, a tiny sense of power, and that can be genuinely soothing. But sometimes the soothing becomes a loop. The threshold for what feels like too much gets lower. The room gets emptier. The rules get stricter, and the simplicity that once felt freeing starts to feel rigid. At that point, minimalism is no longer just an expression of who someone is. It may also be helping them avoid what they feel. That doesn't make it fake. It just makes it more psychologically complex. Because the exact same outward behavior can come from two very different places. One person clears a room because that's the environment where their mind feels calmest. Another clears a room because they're trying not to feel grief, anxiety, or loss. Sometimes those are even the same person at different moments in life. That's why the real question isn't whether minimalism is good or bad. It's what function it serves. Does the emptiness feel spacious? Or does it feel controlling? Do you feel more like yourself in it? Or more like you're trying to outrun something? Those are different experiences. And most people already know the answer when they slow down long enough to ask. Minimalism is more than an aesthetic because space is never just physical. It's psychological. It affects attention, emotion, identity, presence. For some people, a full room feels rich and alive. For others, it feels like static. For some people, an empty room feels lonely. For others, it feels like finally being able to hear themselves think. So if you've ever walked into a nearly empty space and felt immediate relief, that feeling probably isn't random. It may be telling you something real about how your mind works, how your nervous system filters the world, and what kind of environment lets you function like yourself instead of against yourself. Sometimes the things that look simplest on the outside are actually responding to something deep and complicated underneath. And sometimes an empty room isn't empty at all. Sometimes it's the first place your brain has stopped fighting long enough to rest. Sometimes the spaces we create say more about our inner life than we realize. And once you start recognizing that signal, it begins to reveal how much of your environment has been shaping your state without you realizing, and that's where a deeper pattern starts to emerge that most people never fully see.